Hi, everyone. Today is February 16th, 2025, and we have some special guests on the show, Maurice Odingo and Prudence Iticka. Maurice Odingo is a Pan-African organizer born and raised in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. He's one of the founders, or the founding members, of the socialist organization Comité de Kinshasa and its current general secretary. He is also editor-in-chief of the workers' newspaper Kema Fumbe and a member of the Coalition for the Elimination of Imperialism in Africa. For the past 2 years, Maurice has worked in a mining company based in Kolwezi, which has severely stunted his ability to organize due to the exceptionally long hours, 14 hours a day, 6 times a week or 6 days a week. Kolwezi is considered the cobalt capital of the world. It's home to many foreign mining companies, but the population of this region is unaware of how these companies play a part in their material suffering. Maurice and the Comité de Kinshasa are filling a critical gap in organizing these workers to bring about radical change. He's the first recipient of the Kwame Nkrumah Fellowship for African Organizers. This fellowship, recently launched by the Coalition for the Elimination of Imperialism in Africa, will allow Maurice to use funds to create an economic activity in Kolwezi that generates enough income to cover his essential needs and allows him to focus on full-time organizing for the African struggle. And Prudence Iticka is a Cameroonian-born, Canada-based Pan-African organizer with United African Diaspora and a member of the Coalition for the Elimination of Imperialism in Africa. Maurice and Prudence, thank you for coming on the show and welcome to the Activist News Network.
Thank you for having us. Ils nous remercient seulement pour être venus, donc si tu veux juste les remercier aussi.
So I just wanted to start and dive right in and ask, what is the mission of Comité de Kinshasa and how is it working to advance the struggle for Congolese sovereignty?
Ok, donc Maurice, la première question qu'ils ont, c'est quelle est la mission du comité de Kinshasa et comment est-ce qu'il contribue à faire avancer la lutte pour la souveraineté du Congo?
Oui, merci pour la question et je remercie aussi le camarade pour l'initiative. Je ne me présente pas encore vu que le camarade a eu déjà ma biographie. Je passe directement à la question posée. Le comité de Kinshasa, nous avons une mission, soit des missions vraiment claires. C'est la formation idéologique de la classe ouvrière congolaise, l'organisation des cercles d'études avec les étudiants, les paysans et les ouvriers.
So first of all, he wanted to thank you all for hosting us today. He's not going to introduce them anymore since you guys have already done so. And then he said, so he's going to get right into answering the question. And so the Comité de Kinshasa has a clear mission, which is the ideological education of the working class in Congo through the organizing of study circles for the different sectors of the working class.
Oui, donc le comité de Kinshasa joue un grand rôle dans la défense de la souveraineté congolaise et dans la lutte contre les forces impérialistes. Le comité contribue aussi, comme je l'ai souligné, à l'éducation politique et à l'organisation de la masse pour que cette dernière prenne leur destin en main.
So the Comité de Kinshasa is playing an important role in the defense of Congolese sovereignty by fighting against imperialist forces through political education and the organization of the masses so that they can take control of their destiny.
Ouais, donc depuis la création du Comité de Kinshasa, nous avons pu organiser plusieurs conférences, plusieurs actions sur terrain, et ce qui nous a permis à mettre en place le journal Kema Fumbe de la classe ouvrière, qui contribue à l'information et à la formation de la masse populaire congolaise. Donc, la plus grande réalisation qu'on a eu à faire, c'est la création du journal, qui est un élément très important dans la lutte contre l'impérialisme.
Since the creation of the organization, they have organized many mobilizations, many conferences, and they've also created the journal Kema Fumbe, which is, again, another tool for political education, which to them they see as their greatest achievement is having put forward this journal that speaks on the condition of workers in the Congo and is a tool used to raise the consciousness of the workers.
Voilà un peu en résumé ce que c'est le comité de Kinshasa et ce que nous faisons sur terrain jusqu'à présent.
So that's just a little resume about the Comité de Kinshasa and what some of the activity they've done so far on the ground.
Thank you for that answer, Maurice, and Prudence for you translating. So we're going to step into our next question. You have spent the last 2 years working in a mining company in Kolwezi under extremely grueling conditions, 14-hour shifts, 6 days a week. What does this tell us about the exploitation of the Congolese workers?
Donc la deuxième question, si tu as travaillé depuis les dernières quelques années dans une société minière à Kolwezi, dans des conditions extrêmement pénibles, 14 heures de travail par jour, 6 jours par semaine, qu'est-ce que cela nous apprend sur l'exploitation des travailleurs congolais?
Oui, l'expérience d'avoir travaillé dans une société minière à Kolwezi, dans des conditions pénibles, m'a permis de découvrir plusieurs aspects inquiétants de l'exploitation des travailleurs congolais, particulièrement dans les secteurs extractifs comme le mine.
So, like you said, like having to work, through these like harsh conditions have really allowed me to have a really great, profound analysis of the condition of workers specifically in the mines throughout our region of Kolwezi.
Le mine de Kolwezi qui exploite donc les entreprises d'exploitation de cobalt et de cuivre sont souvent gérées par de grandes multinationales qui bénéficient de profits énormes, tandis que les travailleurs locaux sont sous-payés et soumis à des conditions de travail extrêmes.
So despite the fact that, in Kolwezi, these copper and cobalt mines are owned by, multinational that, generate massive profits through the exploitation of these resources, workers are paid, far below what they deserve for the work that they do. And their wages are not able to, even cover their basic needs.
Oui, travailler 14 heures par jour et 6 jours par semaine est non seulement excessif, mais aussi destructeur pour la santé physique et mentale des travailleurs. Cela implique aussi une pression intense sur les employés avec peu de considération pour leur bien-être.
So a 14-hour working day, 6 days a week, it's not only excessive, but it's also destructive to the workers' physical and mental health. They are under extreme levels of pressure by their employers, and there's very little regard for their well-being.
Oui, dans plusieurs entreprises minières en RDC, malgré des journées de travail extrêmement longues et épuisantes, les travailleurs reçoivent toujours un salaire de subsistance. Un salaire de subsistance qui ne couvre même pas leurs besoins de base. Et cette situation pousse les employés à accepter des conditions de travail abusives car ils n'ont pas d'autre choix économique.
Mm-hmm. So despite the fact that these are extremely long and exhausting working days, workers receive wages that are really far below what they need for their basic needs, and this kind of leads them to still having to accept these abusive working conditions because they have no other economic choices to be able to meet their basic needs.
Il y a aussi l'absence du respect de la législation sociale congolaise, entre autres le code du travail. La plupart des travailleurs dans le mine de Kolwezi sont souvent ignorants de leurs droits et ils ne bénéficient pas des protections légales dont le gouvernement, soit les entreprises, sont censées leur donner. Et aussi, beaucoup ne connaissent même pas les lois sur les heures de travail, sur la sécurité au travail et aussi sur le salaire minimum, donc les SMIC qu'ils doivent recevoir.
Workers in these mines throughout Kolwezi are often unaware of their rights and legal protections. Many are unaware of laws in regards to like working hours, workplace safety, minimum wages, which leaves them very vulnerable to exploitation because they're not aware of what their expectations should be.
Il y a aussi le manque d'une organisation des travailleurs et des organisations de solidarité entre les travailleurs. Cela aggrave aussi, cela aussi s'explique par rapport à un État faible que nous avons qui est contrôlé par les puissances impérialistes. Donc l'État aussi ne joue pas son rôle pour protéger le travailleur dans des sociétés minières.
He says that there's also a lack of solidarity and workers' organization in this sector, for folks to be able to kind of help each other out and protect each other. And he says that, of course, on top of it all, there is a weak state, that does not at all put any emphasis or there's any kind of regulation in regards to workers' laws or labor rights or the safety of workers, which of course exacerbate the conditions of these workers in mines.
Donc, le système actuel de production minière, soit d'exploitation de mines et à Kolwezi, privilège le profit à la dignité humaine et à la sécurité des travailleurs. Et les travailleurs sont vraiment déconsidérés dans les entreprises minières.
The current system of mining production in Kolwezi prioritizes profit over human dignity or worker safety, and there's really no regards to the fundamental rights of the people who work in these mines. I think that's all.
Great. Well, thank you so much for that answer and giving us all of that context. We wanted to shift gears a little bit and ask about the recent M23 offensive. And so my question is, what are the key factors driving the M23 offensive, and how does it fit into the larger picture of imperialist aggression against the people of the DRC?
Donc, on va un peu avancer, puisque dans ta deuxième réponse, tu as un peu répondu la troisième question. Donc, on va avancer maintenant vers la question sur l'offensive du M23. Donc, la question, c'est quels sont les principaux facteurs à l'origine de l'offensive du M23 et comment cela s'inscrit-il dans le cadre plus large de l'agression impérialiste contre la RDC?
Oui, cette offensive a été déclenchée par une combinaison de plusieurs facteurs internes et externes. Dans un contexte plus large d'instabilité politique et de lutte pour les ressources naturelles que le pays, la RDC, subit de la part de grandes puissances impérialistes, entre autres les États-Unis et l'Union européenne.
So he says this offensive was kind of like unleashed through a combination of different factors that are both internal and external, which within a greater context of like, you know, the creating a general instability within the country by the imperialists in order to be able to, exploit the natural resources of the country.
Oui, donc cette agression, cette offensive s'inscrit dans une dynamique où les puissances impérialistes profitent de cette situation pour piller les richesses du pays au détriment de la population congolaise. Parce que sans les ressources naturelles du pays et sans les Congo, nous savons tous que les puissances impérialistes et les entreprises capitalistes au monde, ils n'auront pas une survie. Donc, ils vivent, c'est à cause de nos richesses qui sont ici au Congo. C'est pour cette raison qu'ils créent toujours les chaos, ils déstabilisent des parties stratégiques.
So he says this is just part of dynamic in which imperialist powers are taking advantage of the situation for their own geopolitical and economic interests. As we all know, without the Congo, the imperialist powers and their capitalist companies could not survive, right? So there is a need on their part to maintain the Congo in a constant state of, chaos, because of course it facilitates the exploitation of these resources that they cannot live without.
Voilà un peu ce que la RDC subit comme attaque économique et géopolitique. Et cela est soutenu beaucoup plus par certains Congolais corrompus qui sont à la recherche de l'argent, de richesse, qui facilitent les puissances impérialistes à piller la République et à déstabiliser de parties stratégiques, les régions qui ont beaucoup plus de minéraux stratégiques.
Mm-hmm. And he just added, a comment in regard to like the internal players in this destabilization, like, the national bourgeoisie that is in on all this, that perpetrates, this destabilization of key sectors within the Congo, like the eastern region of Goma, and then, the Kolwezi, Lualaba province. And these internal, enemies that collaborate with the imperialists to allow for the, this kind of like super exploitation of these key regions within the Congo. Can I add something? Like, can I just throw in a little something to this question? I think there's been a lot of talks right now that are really hyper-focused on M23 in Rwanda. And, I fear that we are kind of like centering Paul Kagame in Rwanda and decentering who he works for, right? It is not an M23 aggression against the Congo. It is NATO's war against the Congo, right? It is the United States of America and the European Union's war against the Congo. So I think it's so important for us to always name the key players, right? There's no way Rwanda, a tiny little country that's like 1/8 of the size of Congo and like I think less than 10% of the population, could possibly wage a war against a country like the Congo. So we have to center the fact that this is a NATO attack against the Congo, utilizing as usual their proxies, right? And in this case, it's Rwanda and it's Paul Kagame.
Thank you, Prudence and Maurice. I think that the mentioning of imperialism and the connection to its role in the Congo is something that we really want to hone in on in this next question. So the Libido Corridor is being promoted as a major infrastructure project, but in reality, it appears to be another imperialist scheme. Can you explain how this railway serves Western interests rather than the Congolese people?
OK, donc on va maintenant sauter à la question sur, comme on a déjà apporté le thème de l'impérialisme, les camarades veulent avancer vers la question qui discute du corridor de Lobito. Donc, Le corridor de Lobito est présenté comme un projet d'infrastructure majeur, mais en réalité, il s'agit d'un autre projet impérialiste. Pouvez-vous nous expliquer en quoi ce chemin de fer sert les intérêts occidentaux plutôt que ceux du peuple congolais?
Oui. En général, le corridor de Lobito est présenté comme un projet de développement pour les pays de l'Afrique centrale, selon la conception de puissance impérialiste, ce qu'il nous présente. Mais en réalité, ces corridors servent principalement à soutenir les intérêts économiques des puissances impérialistes, entre autres l'Union européenne et les États-Unis.
So the Lobito corridor. Non, vas-y.
Ok, ouais, je finis par là. Donc, sert les intérêts de puissances impérialistes, entre autres les États-Unis et l'Union européenne, au détriment de la population locale.
So the Lobito corridor, although it's being presented as this like developmental project for the countries of Central Africa, it's primarily focused on the DRC, Zambia, and Angola. In reality, it's going to serve to support, the economic interests of primarily the United States and the European Union, to the detriment of the Congolese masses, right? Because it's going to be facilitating the export of critical materials, minerals out of the DRC towards Europe.
Oui, donc en facilitant l'exportation de minerais critiques et en intégrant la région dans des réseaux économiques et mondiaux dominés par des secteurs étrangers, ces projets contribuent à maintenir la RDC et d'autres pays de la région dans une dépendance économique, sans réellement promouvoir un développement autonome et durable pour les populations locales.
So by facilitating, the export of these critical minerals and further, entrenching that region into the global capitalist network that's obviously dominated by the imperialists, this project is going to really work to keep the DRC and other countries like Zambia and Angola in the region economically dependent. And it's not promoting any type of like autonomous or sustainable development for the actual local population. Bon, peut-être que je peux ajouter à ce que tu as dit. No? If I could perhaps add to this and just give like a hint of like maybe, because I think Maurice like answered, but I just want to give people like a little bit more like kind of like the basics about this this project, which might help them understand. So this was like I think in 2023 during the G20 summit, I believe in India, the United States and the European Union, they signed an agreement to revive this old colonial railway, like the Lobito corridor. It's actually a railway that existed, that was created back, I think in the early 1900s, by the colonial governments of Belgium and Portugal, right? Of course, back then, same process. It was to export copper and cobalt from the regions of DRC and Zambia towards Europe. So in 2023, the United States and European Union are like, perfect, we're going to revive this old colonial railway that's going to connect the DRC to the Zambia, all the way to the port of Lobito, which is in Angola, in order to export, quickly from the port of Lobito, all those minerals out to Europe via the Atlantic Ocean, right? So like Marie said, the primary purpose of this corridor is quick exit for these minerals, right? And it is targeting particularly a region in Congo called like the Lualaba province. Like Kolwezi is within that province because that province contains like 70% of the world's cobalt reserves, as well as one of the largest deposits of copper, which we all know these are two minerals that are like incredibly critical for like the functioning of, modern society, right? And although this project is being, if you read these various articles that are being written, they're talking about like integrating Central Africa and, creating jobs for the masses. But we all know, those are lies. This is just rapid exploitation and quick exit via, the Atlantic Ocean for our resources. And it's just a continuation of a plan that had started in the 1900s when this railway was first created. And if you kind of look at all the people that are involved, you can kind of see like all of the imperialist powers are back again in the Congo, right? Like Portugal is involved in this. They're going to be like running the trade. The European Union is like guarding the interests of, the white world as usual. The United States is the biggest, investor in this. Like they're recognizing that they have kind of lost access to the great minerals in the Congo, because we know, of course, that China has most of the access to those critical minerals in the Congo. And now they're like, okay, we're losing ground. What are we going to do? And they connected with, unfortunately, Zambia, Angola, and the DRC have neo-colonial governments, right? They are fully, participating into this project and helping sell this to their masses as something progressive and something good, because they're going to get a cut out of it, right? So while everybody's kind of looking at Goma and what's happening in Goma, there's some crazy things happening in Kolwezi, and folks are not seeing. The first shipment has already been sent out to Europe. They've already begun, exploiting these mines. And, Maurice can talk about this later, because he lives in Kolwezi and has been able to actually see, this train that runs through nearby where he lives, and see these mines being exploited in the way that it's affecting the local population since they've expanded this corridor.
Thank you for bringing that up, actually, because it leads us into our next question. Maurice, you being from an area that is full of natural minerals and resources that is clearly being exported out of this area into these Western imperialist countries, we wanted to ask you, what impact will the Lobito corridor have on Kolwezi and the communities surrounding the mining sector?
Donc, la question, c'est comme toi, tu vis dans la région, effectivement, où ce corridor va être va traverser. Il demande quel sera l'impact de ce corridor sur Kolwezi et les communautés qui entourent cette région avec tout ce secteur minier.
Oui. Donc, la création, soit le développement des infrastructures pour le corridor de Lobito, va créer premièrement des conflits avec des communautés agricoles locales. Parce que nous sommes dans un milieu un peu rural, la province est un peu enclavée et les gens se lassent toujours dans les activités agricoles pour survivre. Il se fait que quand ils vont commencer à construire, à réhabiliter, parce que le corridor existe depuis longtemps, la ligne, donc quand ils vont commencer à réhabiliter cette voie, ça va créer un peu des conflits avec la communauté qui cultive tout au long du corridor. Donc, ça va créer des problèmes avec la population locale, les agricultures.
So he said that the development of this infrastructure will create conflicts with local farming communities, of which there are many in that region. Agriculture is very important for local population survival. And of course, as this corridor is being built, it will require land for the roads and the railroads and the ports, which will then mean it will reduce the space available for farming along that corridor, which is a source of livelihood for many families in the region.
Oui, donc à cela aussi s'ajoute, ça va créer aussi les conflits fonciers. Donc il y a des habitations, et quand il y a des habitations, l'État va chercher comment délocaliser ces gens, et ça va créer encore des conflits fonciers avec l'État et soit avec les entreprises. Et comme le système capitaliste que nous avons soutient toujours les intérêts du capital international. Et il y aura des déplacements partout où les gens vont abandonner leur maison à cause de ce projet.
So he also talks about the displacement that will be occurring because, of course, as they're building this roads and this railroad, this road is going to be running through certain people's homes, and there are folks that are going to be displaced. And seeing as their government is obviously in full support of this project, they will not side with the people to help them maintain their land and their homes, but they will side with the companies who are going to need to clear these people in order to help, expand their project.
Oui, parce que nous savons à Kolwezi, je ne sais pas si vous êtes informé, le centre-ville du Kolwezi, il y a une mine souterraine en dessous où il y a des projets et l'État a décidé de délocaliser la ville parce que toute la ville, il n'y a que du minerai et ils doivent exploiter et en dessous de la ville, il n'y a que de mines souterraines.
And he was saying that in
Voilà un
right,
peu la situation telle qu'elle se présente.
he talked about how in
Ok,
downtown.
hey, continuez.
Okay, tu as fini. Okay, he also mentioned how like right now
Oui, oui, oui,
in
oui,
the
oui, j'ai fini, j'ai fini.
downtown region of Kolwezi,
Oui.
they have noticed that there's like a lot of underground mines that like they've already that have been like discovered, and the city is thinking of how they are going to displace all the people who live in that region so that they can start opening that mine. And he said that a place like Kolwezi where like the ground is obviously so rich in minerals, right? There's, people are constantly at risk of being kicked out of their homes because we need to open up the ground and start mining. And of course, there will be very little protection for these people who are going to be asked to, relocate because we need to open up a new mine where their house used to be. As-tu quelque chose d'autre à ajouter sur cette
Oui,
question?
donc le dernier... Oui, oui. Donc, le dernier impact vraiment qui touche directement la vie de la population, c'est la pollution de l'air, des eaux et des sols. Donc, vu que le corridor va faciliter, le corridor va faciliter l'exportation vraiment à grande quantité de minerais et l'exploitation aussi va augmenter. S'ils exploitaient 10 tonnes par jour, par exemple, ils vont commencer à exploiter x 10. Donc, l'air, l'eau et le sol sera vraiment pollué.
And he said that
Voilà,
finally,
c'est un peu ça, les impacts vraiment de ce corridor.
He said that so finally the last impact on this it will be the pollution of air, water, and the soil as well. He said that as this corridor is being built and growing, if before maybe there were only exploiting maybe like 10 ton, I don't know what ton is in English, 10 tons, it's 10 something of exploitation. Now with the expansion of this corridor, they are going in deeper. They are doing higher levels of exploitation, which means that the air and the water and the soil that people need for farming is getting more and more. That kind of pollution will only be amplified as the corridor is developed and growing and advancing. And that's all.
Well, yeah, thank you for all of that context and how that Lobito corridor will impact the Congolese communities. And that takes us to our last question. How can Pan-Africanist and socialist movements across the continent and in the diaspora support the struggle of the Congolese people?
Can I just also say that we actually wrote an article on the Lobito corridor, which I think it's like a nice primer for folks. Like we definitely encourage people to read it. Maurice co-wrote it. So just a little plug if you want to learn more about that corridor. OK, so la dernière question, on a avancé. Il demande comment est-ce que les mouvements panafricanistes et socialistes du continent et de la diaspora peuvent-ils soutenir la lutte en RDC? Est-ce que tu nous entends toujours, Maurice?
Oui. Oui, donc le mouvement panafricaniste et socialiste qui sont en Afrique ou soit à la diaspora, Et ils ont un grand rôle à jouer pour soutenir la lutte du peuple congolais. Et aujourd'hui, les soutiens ne peuvent pas se limiter dans des actions de solidarité ponctuelles, comme nous les vivons, mais doit s'étendre en des stratégies politiques, économiques et sociales plus larges, qui visent réellement à renforcer la souveraineté de la RDC et à combattre l'exploitation impérialiste.
So he said that Pan-Africanist and socialist movements in Africa and in the diaspora have a really big role to play in supporting the struggle for the Congolese people.
Ouais, je continue ou tu vas traduire?
He said that support cannot be limited to like one-off solidarity actions, but it has to be extended to a broader political and economic and social strategies that are aimed at strengthening the sovereignty of the DRC and combating its imperialist exploitation.
Oui, donc en collaboration avec le mouvement et les organisations socialistes qui sont à la diaspora, soit en dehors de la RDC, et en travaillant en collaboration dans l'éducation politique de la masse et au soutien direct de l'élite locale, le mouvement panafricaniste et socialiste peuvent aider le Congo à sortir de la dépendance et ouvrira la porte à un changement révolutionnaire. Et donc, l'aide, si je veux me résumer, l'aide idéologique est très importante et aussi l'aide économique. Parce que la lutte que nous menons contre les puissances impérialistes, ça demande de moyens matériels pour faire face à leurs pseudo-organisations. Voilà un peu l'aide vraiment des organisations qui sont ailleurs. Et aussi, ces organisations, soit ces mouvements, ils doivent jouer comme des relais. Ils doivent jouer comme des relais pour transmettre nos actions sur terrain. Et comme nous écrivons des articles, il y a un récent article qu'on vient d'écrire avec la camarade Prudence sur les corridors de l'Obito. Essayez aussi de partager ces articles que nous écrivons pour dénoncer l'exploitation, le pillage des entreprises impérialistes en Afrique. Ça va nous permettre de faire avancer la lutte et aussi le soutien matériel qui est aussi très important. Les ouvrages, on en a besoin, et soutenir nos projets qui sont à long et à court terme pour permettre aux militants qui sont sur terrain de travailler et ne pas être achetés par les forces impérialistes.
Okay, that was a really good answer. So he also said, you know, there's two kind of help, like two major kind of help that we need, ideological and material. You know, he said like ideologically, like we want our comrades on the outside who support our struggle to relay the work that we do on the outside, you know, to talk to people about the things that we are telling them about the struggle on the ground, to share the work that we do on the ground, to share, like, you know, they have a journal, share the articles that they write, and really, you know, put forward all those things. You know, they don't have access to the same level of technology that we do here. So if they share something with us, they really want us to help put it out there and really amplify their work that they're doing locally. And he also talked about material support. He said, you know, there's, you know, they need material support, like they need books. They're also developing these different projects that are going to help them be kind of like self-sustaining as an organization. And he also said, also help members kind of not get bought off by these different, you know, political organizations that are in the Congo. Like they need to be somewhat independent. So they have these different projects that they are developing to be an independent organization, and that those of us outside can also help support these projects. So yeah, the ideological and the material help is really fundamental. And he also said, you know, combining international solidarity and political education and direct support for local struggles, you know, in the Congo is the way that we can really help the Congo break free from its imperialist dependence and, you know, help pave the way to build a revolutionary struggle. And I'd just like to add to that. Because our, like we mentioned earlier, like Maurice is part of the Coalition for the Elimination of Imperialism in Africa, and our coalition recently launched a fellowship called the Fellowship for the Kwame Nkrumah Fellowship for African Organizers, because like we think it is so important for militants in really critical zones in Africa to really be supported in becoming like full-time organizers or be as independent as possible, which is why we created this fellowship to, you know, really targeting critical Pan-Africanists in Africa so we can help give them some significant material support so that they can advance their struggle and advance whatever movement that they're developing. And we chose Maurice as our first recipient because, you know, just to highlight the importance of the Congo. You know, I think we always quote how important the Congo is, but I don't know if we truly recognize how, you know, dire the situation in the Congo is and how we really need to unite around the Congo and its struggle and support the revolutionary forces on the ground because they do exist. I think we've made a great error in the diaspora of we have centered nonprofits as like our main voices and our main references for the Congo, somehow nonprofits, not people who are organizing for revolution or organizing against imperialism, but people who really highlight the humanitarian side, which we get it. There are dire humanitarian needs in the Congo, but it's still a revolutionary struggle. So we need to center those that are struggling to, you know, destroy capitalism, not those people who are just helping the poor and the needy, because that is not sustainable, right? So we really want to emphasize the importance of organization like Comité de Kinshasa that have revolutionary objectives, right? Like radical objectives, and to really support them because there are not a lot. And I really encourage folks to listen to a webinar where we had Maurice on, I think it was 2 webinars ago, and he talked about some of the challenges that revolutionary organizations face in the Congo, because the Congo is saturated with organizations, right? But 99% of them are these like Soros-funded NGOs and like fake revolutionary organizations that have a lot of resources because, of course, they have outside funding by these reactionary forces. And the revolutionary forces are kind of isolated, you know, and it's very dangerous to organize in that kind of environment where there's a bunch of fake revolutionaries and then you're the real one and nobody, you know, is supporting you. So I really encourage people to tune into that webinar because he said something that I'll never forget. He said, you know, the Congo does not need aid, right? There's not enough aid we can provide to the Congo to liberate it. You know, what the Congo needs is people who are going to help them build their struggle. Right? They need help to develop a revolutionary struggle. They don't need you to constantly look at it as a country that needs aid. So I really ask people to pay attention to what the Comité de Kinshasa is doing and seek to find other resistant forces. They do exist. It's hard to find them, but they actually do exist. There are revolutionaries in the Congo, and we need to find them and we need to support them.
So with that being said, that wraps up our interview today. Maurice and Prudence, thank you so much for coming on the show. We are very happy to have you all here. And to our audience, thank you for tuning in. Please support the incredibly important and courageous work that Maurice is engaged in with Comité de Kinshasa by contributing to the Kwame Nkrumah Fellowship for African Organizers that the Coalition of the Elimination of Imperialism in Africa has recently launched, the one that Prudence was talking about just before. Contributions to this fellowship are in a meaningful way to support the struggle for the Congo's liberation. Donations are accepted through Venmo at Defend Africa. And thank you.
Thank you.
We state these facts only to let you know that those of us who are revolutionary, Pan-Africanists, is not because we love revolution. It is historically determined, and we have no alternative but to follow history and to use history for the benefit of our people.